Hello, and welcome to another episode of Surroundscapes, the podcast that covers various aspects of the AV industry, from technical Q&A sessions right through to larger topics. It's hosted by Bluesound Professional, and today's episode is one of our hot topic episodes, and I'm delighted to have an old friend here, Elad Offer, who I met at TED probably 15 years ago. So hi there, Elad.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Me too.
So as I mentioned, I met you, I think, was it TED Global or was it in...
It was TED Global quite a few years ago.
And we met each other at various times since, and we've actually just hung out down at his house in LA a few weeks ago. But I want to start by asking you about your history. Tell us how you got into this industry, because it's an interesting story.
Sure. It is getting to be a long history. Excuse me. So basically, if you want to go all the way back, I just fell in love with computers when I was 7. I wanted an Atari to play Pong, and I realized I'm really dating myself by doing that. And my dad basically said, "No, you're not getting that because that's just a toy. I'll get you an Apple II, and you can learn how to code for it, how to do stuff with it." So even at age 7, my parents sent me to a class with a bunch of 30-year-olds that were doing career transition into using computers, and I learned BASIC with them and really kind of fell in love with computers. So throughout my childhood, my teen years, I was heavily into computers. I got to, I got to get paid to code in my teens, 13, 14. I was already getting paid to do that. By the time I finished university, I was already in charge of the computer systems at the Tel Aviv University, where I was going for a company called Silicon Graphics. So all the high-end computer graphics computers were all, at the time, Silicon Graphics. There's really no competition to them. And just kind of was getting a little tired of doing that, and started to look for opportunities to do something that's to do with computers, and sort of my love for photography, which was sort of blooming in my late teens as well. And a friend of mine who had gone to work for Silicon Graphics basically said, "You should go to NAB, which is the National Association of Broadcasters conference that happens every year in Vegas, and check out what's out there," because there were some things that I knew were not the right path for me. Photoshop and all sort of the obvious computer graphics things at the time. Israel had just had a huge influx of Russians sort of escaping the collapse of the Soviet Union. People with amazing graphic design skills, and sort of when it comes to 2D touch-up work and all that, just there was no competing with that crew. And so when it came to like, oh, I also need to make a living at this, I was looking for something else. In any case, I took myself to Vegas, walked around the floor, met with all sorts of people, and found out about something I didn't know existed, which is something called compositing. At the time, it was basically 2 main systems that existed, each of them like $1 million each. One, a company called Quantel had a machine called the Henry at the time. It was already 3rd or 4th generation. And then there was a company called Discrete that was making a machine called Flame. And I'm calling it a machine because it was a combination of hardware, Silicon Graphics, in the discrete logic software, with the discrete logic software, and like I said, sort of a $1 million machine, refrigerator size, or that. And again, I've never heard of any of this before going to NAB. Then I got myself back home, found out that there were 3 companies in Tel Aviv that were doing this kind of work with these sort of machines. And as is sometimes great and sometimes not so great, Israelis have no sense of scale. As in, at the time, the Israeli market, I mean, it still is a very small country, but the Israeli market was tiny and certainly should not have 3 companies doing this kind of work. It just didn't make sense for the budgets, but there were. And I managed to convince one of them to let me intern in return for running all of their silicon graphics machines. Um, I really don't think they ever fully intended for me to become what's called a flame artist in Israel, although there's a whole discussion in the industry. Is it flame technician, flame editor, flame artist? And we can get into that later. But because I think that's a whole discussion of like, what is the artist's job in all these different things. But they let me intern. I sort of forced my way in. This is mid '90s. By the late '90s, I had already become a visual effects supervisor for that company and decided, like sort of the crazy Israeli, that I've maxed out everything I can do in Israel, and I wanna go to the US to kind of find what's next. So I went to New York for a little bit, then came to LA, and pretty much immediately dove in and started to work on a bunch of music videos with some really sort of cutting edge companies at the time that were in Los Angeles doing that sort of work. And sort of from there progressed, had my own company very quickly after that. Again, doing in the arts, mostly music videos. And I should say, a lot of my friends in the film industry come from a very sort of cinema sort of place. They love every Kubrick shot ever. They can tell you exactly what he did and why, and all these sort of things. For me, music videos was why I was drawn into it. If I'm really real, it's the music and the stuff that was happening. All these music videos from LA, from London, that were really special and really touching and really emotional in so many ways. Kind of drew me in. So I felt incredibly lucky to have landed in LA right into the middle of the music video world, especially hip hop. I worked with Outkast for many years. I have a Moon Man. It's the the only award I keep out, really, because it's the one that really matters to me. That was like the goal. In fact, it was a bit of a weird moment getting a Moon Man, because like, oh, okay, this is it. Like, what's beyond this in music videos? But just doing them is so much fun. Also incredibly difficult, and certainly broke up my my first marriage. And then unfortunately 2008 happened, and together with the music industry kind of going through a rough moment, music videos kind of disappeared a little bit earlier. I shouldn't say disappeared, but certainly they didn't have the budget to do the sort of work that I was doing. And then I went freelance for a while, worked for all the biggest companies in the world, really, and did all of it: features, TV episodic work, commercials, directed some things here and there throughout all that period, the aughts and later. And then this story is coming to the end. It's almost there. In 2002, I joined a company owned by a friend of mine called The Artery, a company out of New York. And I was the executive creative director, whatever that means, which is how I ended up landing in the Bono project, which is why I'm kind of mentioning that. which was a project for Apple TV Plus, Radical Media, which is one of the biggest companies in the US, certainly I think in the world, working around sort of music. They're kind of music focused. They do a lot of music documentaries. Their slew or slate of directors all do music videos as well as commercials and other projects. And then this was a project for Bono, as I mentioned, but also our part was specifically for the Apple Vision Pro. I was kind of landed in that seat because I was the ECD, and also because of my technical background, there were all sorts of technical things that needed to be figured out to work with the Vision Pro. Ours was the very first feature-length project for the Vision Pro. There's all sorts of color space things and sound things and just pipeline details that had to be figured out and needed a deep technical understanding of what's happening behind the scenes. So it was kind of no-brainer for me to do that. So that's the end. That's kind of where we are. That came out May 30th this year.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, I've left the artery. I'm back to being freelance and figuring out my next steps. I'm trying to get a TV show going. I'm just kind of looking around for cool, creative things to do.
Okay, so we can go back and explore all of that in more detail. It's funny, you said you dated yourself with Pong, and me being older than you, my computer experience was going to our local technical college. So our school had I think Friday mornings we had a few hours in the local technical college who had a mainframe computer, and we were learning Fortran and programming on punch cards. So we'd spend the whole week, writing these really, really basic programs on these punch cards, and then we get this opportunity once a week to go to Merton Tech and actually run the punch cards. And almost every time there would be some error, and it'd get about halfway through and stop, and you'd have this dot matrix printer print out and your punch cards, and you'd have to go back the next, you spend the next week working out what your mistake was, trying to find that punch card, taking that punch card out, repunching it, putting it back in, going back to Merton Tech again and running it again to find it got like a bit further, and then there was another mistake. And looking back on it, it was so slow, but it was fun, and learning Fortran, which was a non-intuitive language, was a interesting beginning. So
apparently, Fortran, people who can code in Fortran are quite needed right now. There's still old legacy systems that haven't been replaced and are very hard to replace.
Yeah, it didn't light my fire in the way it did yours.
I don't think Fortran would have either.
Yeah. Well, also, having your own computer back in the day was not an option. But you're talking about silicon graphics. It was interesting. I think last time we met, I may have told you that when I was at Biamp, we brought out a video product called Tessera Lux, and we had this video mentor called Chuck Van Dusen who worked for SGI, and he also worked for Cloud9, which was the company that Wozniak, Steve Wozniak.
Oh, Steve Wozniak, yes.
Formed
made some amazing things.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He and Chuck did Cloud9 after Apple, and I remember him talking about video artifacts and showing me these various lossless compression algorithms that we were using and upping the compression. And I'm looking at two screens, the uncompressed one and the compressed one, and saying, I said to him, I can't tell a difference. He said, well, that's why we call it lossless. I can show you the difference, but do you really want me to? Because once I show you it, you can't unsee it, and you won't be able to watch TV without seeing these artifacts. And I said to him, no, don't tell me, because I already have that in audio. I can't go to gig with my wife without critiquing the sound balance or whatever. I do not want that for video as well. I want to just be able to watch TV. So I never learned how to find the artifacts.
Yeah, well, these days it can be quite obvious, actually. If you're looking at cable TV or something like that, there are moments where it's really obvious that they're compressing the hell out of the picture. It's definitely not lossless.
Yeah, that's an interesting discussion because that happens on the audio side as well. So that people are watching kind of YouTube or TikTok or something on their phones, and it's incredibly compressed video and incredibly compressed audio. And yes, I can definitely see the artifacts in the video at that stage, and obviously I can hear the audio compression. And there's part of me that dies quietly inside because we're here trying to produce fantastic audio, fantastic video, and people are streaming it in a way that's so compressed. And then
I do think it's an important point in the sense that I think it's important to learn and know where your audience is at, right? And sort of what is the target there, whether you're wasting, honestly, from my perspective, at least, a lot of time on something that they won't notice versus focusing on the parts where you can tell a better story with. And I don't know, for us, let's say, like with this Bono project, we had to give the files to Apple many weeks in advance because they had a whole process to get it to the Apple Vision Pro headset in sort of the exact way that they wanted it to be. And there were certainly moments where, I mean, we, as an artist, you always feel like you need more time. And there were some things where I was like, the extra couple of weeks, even if it would have been just finished a tiny bit less perfectly, would have given me the time to do some things that I wanted to do that I think would have had a bigger impact than making sure that the black levels are exactly right in every frame. So, and then there's I don't know, I've read something, and I can't I don't have the source for it, but it sounds right to me, which is that like Gen Zers and sort of younger people these days, they're so used to listening to this compressed MP3, MP4, whichever compression you want to use, audio, that when you play for them the real thing, as in like full bandwidth, they don't like it. It's not what their brain is used to. And and that's something that you need to take into account if you're doing something where a bunch of, I have a daughter who's 12. If I was to play stuff to her, I want to make sure that she doesn't have sort of internal dissonant feeling from the way I presented it to her, and is free to experience the actual experience.
Yeah, I mean, those are all excellent points. There's several things there. I think your point about not focusing on the technology but focusing on the storytelling is really key. I mean, I do in the audio domain, and I'm sure video people do in the video domain, get super focused on the technology, the quality, and the classic in my industry and the consumer part is hi-fi people playing the same records all the time because they highlight their system. And I'm listening to these records going, yeah, but the music's not very good. And they go, but it makes my system sound fantastic. And you kind of think you're missing the point here. It's a music reproduction system. And if you're not putting decent music in, it doesn't matter how well it sounds. But the other thing, like I used to be, like you, I am a photographer as a hobby. And I was a film photographer for a long time, had my own darkroom. And then eventually got into digital. And my first digital camera was, I think it was 640 by 400 pixels. And I look at those images now, and you can't look at them. I mean, you see every pixel. And the problem with particularly digital is you can't go back and redo it. Once you've recorded something in 640 by 400, you're stuck with it in 640 by 400. So I get your point about kind of the consumers being used to highly compressed, being used to, my daughter listens to her phone on speakerphone, listening to music, and I just go, no, and watches videos on, like this. And it's easy to say, well, we should just produce content that works like that. But there will be a time in the future, and we're already seeing it in audio, where the pendulum swings back and people say, you know what? Actually, I do want to buy records again. I do want to listen in better quality. And if you didn't capture it with that quality, there's no going back. So in our industry, there are people that sell high resolution remastered stuff. And it's like remastered at 96 24-bit or something like that, or 192 24. Mm. And I sometimes talk to people and they say, I can't hear the difference between that and a CD, which is 44 1 16-bit. And sometimes it's because they're just not used to it, as you say, that they're familiar with hearing CDs. But often it's because that music was tracked at 44 1 16. So it was like captured in 16-bit.
Right. But not doing anything.
It's just not doing anything. You can't add information after the fact. Yeah. So I am I'm
going to push back a little bit on that, though, because we are in the age of AI.
Yeah.
Which is actually doing, I mean, it's making up stuff that wasn't there, but it's sort of doing it by machine learning and interpolating what would normally be there, around all of human existence, or at least all recorded human existence.
Yeah.
But it's not. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have source material that you can go back to that's recorded as high a level as you possibly can. I'm just saying, in the creation of anything in production, there's always the push and pull of time, budget, and kind of the tools, and that I think, at least in my world, as a director, as a creative director, the highest value is in the kind of the story, and the fact that you can still see, let's say, some stuff, I don't know, Méliès did, or like Lumière way back in the day, and still feel something from it, even though it's really badly done when into today's standards. I think it is a testament to that mm-hmm. if the story is there, I think we're very tuned to story as people, and we will forgive a lot of stuff.
Absolutely. I mean,
but absolutely record, capture in as high a resolution as possible. Again, with production limitations, some of this footage for any of this immersive VR stuff, Apple or otherwise, is incredibly high res. Blackmagic just released a camera. I forget the exact numbers, but just the amount of data, like it tears through terabytes in minutes, and at some point the cost of that, the hassle of that becomes unreasonable, and you have to figure out where you can decrease the all of that, or even less. I mean, if you're somebody starting out, if you're a student or whatever, even an Alexa or anything like that could be just too much to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And if you shoot on your iPhone but shoot a good story, then maybe the AI can help you later out, maybe not, but if it's a good story, maybe it doesn't it doesn't matter as much.
And that's a good point. I mean, the best capture device in the world is useless if you don't have it with you. So, if you have your iPhone with you and something great happens and you can capture it, or you have an inspiration, then it's way better than not doing it because you didn't have your stuff with you. So that ability to capture at any point, I think, is, we all have something in our pocket that can capture audio and video at really decent quality.
Yes. And like I said, the fact that it's there, the fact that you can just pull it out, it depends on the kind of photography you're doing or audio recording you're doing. But certainly for a lot of things, I'm with you on that. Like just having the tool there, having something to do with, right, is like most of the time when people approach me about advice or the sort of thing like how do you get into the industry or whatever, I don't know what to say other than just go out and do. And the more you do, the better you get at it, and you find what you're specifically good at. But just kind of doing, which is a big hurdle, even when you have all the tools, leaving your room or whatever it might be, just kind of starting on a project, I think for a lot of people is the hardest part. But just having the tool right there maybe makes it like a little easier. And by the way, I mean, some of the stuff I'm saying, maybe it's me making excuses for, like, if you look at my history of music videos in the arts, like I worked on really some of the biggest names, Justin Timberlake and Britney Spears, and like I mentioned, Outkast, and like every hip hop name out there. And some of the videos, looking back, I cringe quite hard. And so maybe some of it is just excuses for the shitty work I did in the past. But I do find that a lot of them, even the one that I cringe at, still hold a value, still hold joy is really the thing that I focus on. Like people see them, 20 years later now, and are still excited by them because they told a good story. We didn't have a lot of time on all of those. I should say the schedules for everything I worked on was usually 2 to 3 weeks to do crazy amount of green screen, blue screens, like stuff from scratch, which was never enough.
Yeah.
But anyways, maybe I'm making excuses, but that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
No, I think it's a great discussion. I also think there is a real discipline in. So on one hand, you can capture an image with an iPhone. On the other hand, I have a Leica rangefinder camera, and when I use that, it's a really it's a process. And I think that having technology that encourages that process, that thoughtfulness, the slow capture of an image, is also valuable. Not that you should have one and not the other, but for me, I take a very different type of photo if I have to think about it, compose it, manually focus it, maybe change lenses, or get myself into the optimum position, than I do if I pull out my phone and snap. They're both valid, but they're very different, and there's room for everything.
I think there's a common thing there, which is I really believe that limitations make for better art.
Yep.
Now, there are different kinds of limitations with those different devices, right? So when you use your film camera, you have to think about certain things and are limited by certain things. When you use your phone, you're limited by others. But I really think when you look at the history of art, artists who suddenly got a lot of money, most of the time got really shitty.
Yep.
Because suddenly everything they wanted to do, they could.
Yep.
And maybe those instincts weren't quite right to begin with. At least that's my take. So I think that's a strong thing there. I like to lean into the limitations of, I get to work at the edge of sort of newest technology quite often. I like leaning into that. I think if you look at, I'm going to go back to music videos for a second, but like Michel Gondry, when Michel, like a lot of the work he did was based on limitations and bugs and problems with compositing that he saw in the room, where somebody who comes from a compositing background like me would be like, no, I need to fix that. And instead he'd go, no, let's lean into it.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually one thing I'm still waiting to see happen with AI, is somebody using the mess, because
Mm-hmm.
AI, when you look at it closely, certainly all the systems that are around now still mess up quite badly
Mm-hmm.
very often. And I still haven't seen anybody really kind of lean into that. There's still sort of the attempt to like, let's force it to do what we want it to, which is fine as a tool, but for art's sake, I'm still waiting for somebody to do that Gondry move and be like, oh no, I figured out a way to make it interesting by actually leaning into where it messes up.
Yeah, embracing the AI slop. It's I think that'll happen after the fact, actually. And it's interesting to me now that a lot of influencers and YouTubers are using old film filters to and some of the most popular cameras at the moment are ones with great film emulations that people can use to recreate, kind of old film stock, and that's the thing. And people are using those filters. Same thing sonically. People are putting in noise and scratches as if things were reproduced on vinyl. So I think you're going to get the embracing of AI slop sometime later.
I buy into that. And to make it about me again, so one of the lucky things that happened to me with this Bono project was that I think immersive VR storytelling is getting to the point where it's getting over that hump of it needs to be a showcase, it needs to be as perfect as it can be. And the only thing that we were asked to do is sort of support Bono's art, support his storytelling. And I didn't need to worry about, am I showcasing the Vision Pro specifically in the best format? It was all about how do we create a better experience overall. And it is that moment. And for immersive VR, I think I got lucky to get involved relatively late. It's been around, let's call it 15 years, and other people have really kind of worked on the path. And it's the same, I think, with any of the other things we're seeing, all these sort of volumetric environments, experiential environments, things like Cosm or a bunch of other ones around the world. There's really that point where it's about to go into, okay, let's just forget about the tools in a way, use them and their limitations in ways that create a more interesting experience. So I'm really kind of excited about where all of that is going, and I'm surprised. I have to admit that a good portion of the 2010s, I was basically doing car commercials and, as I like to say, selling cars and shoes and phones. But it was boring because it's stuff that I've done. It was a matter of just like, okay, how much budget do you have? How much time do you have? What can we do within that production wise? But there was no new things to figure out. And suddenly in the last 3-4 years, between AI, virtual production, these volumetric cubes, immersive VR, things like the Vision Pro, but all the Meta devices as well, and a bunch of other devices, there's suddenly, like, at least I found myself again a place of like, oh shit, I don't know how to do this. I'm not totally sure how to go about it, but let's figure it out, which was the fun in the 90s and the aughts, where there was a lot of that. There was like, oh, okay, cool script. I don't know quite how to do this, but let's all get our heads together and we'll make it happen. So I'm really excited to be in this moment again, because it is
Mm-hmm.
a learning moment, and I personally just really like being in that mode of like, I got to learn new things, I got to interact with a lot of other interesting people who have interesting thoughts that may or may not line up with mine, but at least I can sort of incorporate that into my worldview, whether artistically or other. So it's really sort of stressful times, but also I think really exciting in sort of the world of storytelling.
Yeah, I think I'm going to come back to this volumetric spaces question later on because I'm super interested in this. But I'm going to go back a little bit, and I'll just throw in a reference. You mentioned all these amazingly talented Russians coming over to Israel with their skills, and that instantly reminded me of my favorite book ever, which is William Gibson's Pattern Recognition. And the spoiler alert, that kind of involves a Russian, a pair of Russian people developing this footage. But I want to go back to compositing and being a flame artist. And
Okay.
for some of our viewers,
Don't know what
well, they don't know at all what that is. Other people know totally what it is, but so don't spend a huge amount of time on it. But what is compositing and what is working in flame?
Compositing is basically, I assume that everybody knows what Photoshop is at this point. So compositing is Photoshop for moving images, whatever frame rate. I used to say 24 frames per second, but now you get a lot of options. But for moving images. So compositing takes the basic tools that are in Photoshop and applies them with a bunch of additional tools that allow you to do things over time without having to do frame by frame by frame for those sequences. Although very early on in this world of compositing, people did need to do the work frame by frame. Thankfully, I missed that. And then nowadays, I think the most known version of that is After Effects, which is a relatively late arrival to the scene. But the two biggest companies, as I said earlier, were Quantel and Discrete Logic early on. And Discrete Logic made a specific software called Flame. They had a few other ones, but all of it at some point became Flame. Nowadays, it's only Flame. And it just has a lot of tools to edit footage, combine layers of elements together to composite them into one final result. And when I started, I actually had to choose between going sort of 3D animation path, CGI as it's generally called today, or compositing. And when you do CG, you have to do a lot of building of things, and it takes a while to get to a point where your final image looks right. Although a lot less these days, because you can actually skip a lot of parts with AI. But I am in some ways short of patience, and what I like about compositing is that once you have all your elements together, you can kind of quickly get to sort of kind of where you're going, and then it's a matter of finessing it and making it better. But you can kind of get to a place where, okay, this looks like what I'm after. So I chose the sort of compositing route. And another interesting thing about Flame, which actually came out quite useful later in life, was that everything in Flame is composited in what's called a 2.5D environment, meaning that each of the layers, unlike Photoshop, lives in space, and you can move it closer or further away from the computer camera, and then it all gets put together and sort of filmed into one thing. But you're laying out things in space, and you're sort of get used to thinking about the world as it's almost like a diorama. There's a bunch of flat things laid out against each other, and when you look at it from just the right perspective, it looks real and perfect. But if you move the camera just a tiny bit, you move your perspective, everything falls apart. And it's something that I played with quite a bit earlier. In my days, I did an Outcast music video for I Like the Way You Move that kind of leans into that quite hard. And then in this Bono thing that came in quite useful, but just as a way to think about the world. In compositing, Flame had all these tools that made it easier, quicker to get to. And then there's another element for Flame, just as an industry thing that really doesn't have to do with the compositing, which was because the machines were so expensive, because it allowed for really fast iteration, Flame artists became sort of the rock stars of certainly the commercial advertising world. So you had to learn not just how to do the work, but also how to sit in a room with, I don't know, 6, 7 advertising people, agency people behind you, having a good old time, drinking, eating, talking, entertain them. Almost every Flame artist I know is a DJ of sorts, because you had to kind of select the music in the room. Although honestly, just as a general thing, every really good visual artist that I've met is super into music. There's a thing about a sort of intangible thing about timing, and that I think somehow combines with the love of music, which I guess kind of makes sense. But so every single one would DJ and put a playlist together and make sure that the room is also kind of vibing in the right way. So for a long time, the Flame artists, I'll go with artists. I know I said we'll talk about it, but this idea is a Flame editor, Flame technician, Flame artist, but I really lean into artist. It really was kind of the top in commercial advertising sort of person, and that was the hardest part for me to learn. It was not the how to do the compositing, it was how to handle the room. Especially coming from an IT background, where I'm like, oh, move away, I'll fix it for you. I know the solution. Suddenly you have to work with a lot of other people in real time and listen, and really listen, not just pretend to listen, just run out the clock until they stop talking.
You were telling me about this, and I was shocked that you were compositing film with soundtrack, but yet playing music in the background for the people listening. It was like shocking to me. But I do want to talk to you about this kind of Flame artist versus Flame technician versus just the idea of how creative is compositing. Why do you say Flame artist?
The simplest way I can go about it is when you open up a setup. So the nowadays all the compositing systems are what's called node based, which means that you have sort of graph where one thing leads to the other. So you take one image and then you put it into some sort of node that does something, and then the output of that goes into another node that does something, et cetera, and then it all builds until the very end there's like one render bit that just puts all of it together. And no two compositors will create the same graph, no matter how much they were trained in the same place by the same people, how much the output has to be the same. You can see the brain at work, and I can tell you a lot about artists' personality based on how they put the graph together and sort of their thought process in it. So to me, that it points to it being an artist at work, because there's a lot of choices as to how you put it together, and when you do that, it affects things. But more than that, I've been lucky enough to work with some Flame artists. I mean, nowadays the biggest like is Nuke and After Effects, but where their touch just made the shot or the entire timeline, the entire whatever it might be, film sequence or commercial or music video, so much better.
Mm-hmm.
Like they just knew how to tweak it a little bit, and usually with it, like it would take a ton of work, but just their touch would elevate it in a way that I don't even think I know how to do. There's certain people
Yeah.
who are just extraordinary in that kind of visual way,
Mm-hmm.
and so that to me says this is an art and not just a technician following a set of rules. And the other ways, some people would call it a flame editor or nuke editor, and I love editors. I think they're incredibly important and incredibly creative, and I think most people don't quite understand just how important editors are to the process. I think they're a little bit underappreciated, honestly, and a good editor can turn a pile of crap into something really, really good. And a bad editor can turn a pile of good material into a pile of crap.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something different for me. Editors, mm, I don't even know if I can articulate it quite well, but it's a different thing than what flame artists do.
Sure.
And the one of the differences is that editors can't generally work with nothing at all. Compositors, generally speaking, that's the case as well. You start with existing material, but if you had to, you can draw your own stuff. You can make stuff that's completely from scratch, using some of the tools and whatever. So it's not quite there. So I've decided to lean into artists, but also as my personal journey, I struggled for a long time with calling myself an artist. It always rang untrue,
Mm-hmm.
and even though I've done stuff in pretty much every visual medium, I can't play a musical instrument to save my life, but in every visual medium. So I've painted, I've done silk screening and the things. I've photography. I've directed commercials and music videos and shorts and things, and it took a long time for me to be comfortable. And even these days, like I'm sort of finally relaxing into that.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a art school thing. Like if you go to art school or film school, you're immediately walking around like I'm an artist.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't. I went to school for math and computer science. So
I think
um,
I think you've really answered it well. And I think you answered my next question, which was going to be, can you tell a particular flame artist by looking at their content? And you said not only can you tell them, but you can tell their personality, which is like amazing. So we could talk for hours, but I want to get on to something which was really interesting to me, which was that a few months ago, you sent me a text and said, here, I can finally reveal what I've been working on for the last 18 months. And you kind of announced to me that you'd been directing this Songs of Surrender project for Bono on the Apple Vision Pro. And when we met up in your house there in LA, I was able to put on an Apple Vision Pro and watch it. And it was jaw-dropping. It was like, I can't even describe to someone who hasn't seen it the impact of it. It's amazing in ways that I can't articulate. So tell me, this is super interesting to me. Tell me the whole process of you getting involved and what you did, and talk us through it.
well, first of all, I really appreciate the compliment, and the whole thing about needing to experience it is both great because I got very lucky to be in this sort of groundbreaking moment for immersive storytelling, where I said sort of, or as explained, I think we've over the hump of needing to just have it as a technical showcase. I was really able to kind of lean into Bono's art. But also it can be quite hard because very few people have seen it. It's obviously it's an amazing device. The Apple Vision Pro is really amazing, but it's still early days for it. So it's kind of progressing into a point where hopefully more people will see it. But you really need the Vision Pro to experience this. It doesn't this project at least doesn't exist in any other platform. But the story was a bit circuitous. And like I said, I was the executive creative director at the Artery. The Artery got approached to do a shorter piece as a immersive experience that was sort of together with what I call the cinema version of Bono's Stories of Surrender. And Radical Media and the Artery have a long relationship. And I got put into the seat of being the creative director on this shorter piece because, again, as I mentioned earlier, I have all the technical background, and there was a lot of technical stuff to figure out. This is really, regardless of length, one of the earliest projects to be done for the Vision Pro, specifically shot with the Apple special immersive cameras. So really, for the beginning parts, I was the visual effects supervisor and sort of creative director on a vision of this that was directed by Andrew Dominic. But as we were kind of building up, Apple had a taste for something else and started to ask whether we in the team have any ideas. And I started to raise my hand sort of more and more until I found myself as sort of the creative director of this feature-length piece that's the very first feature-length immersive VR project for the Vision Pro, maybe overall in VR. Some people argue over what is immersive and what isn't, but I certainly land on the side of this is an immersive experience throughout. But what happened there was that we started to work with not just the footage that was shot with these special immersive cameras that make you really, really feel like you're standing next to Bono, or you're in the crowd in the Beacon Theater, but also with Andrew Dominic's cinema version to make something that is, for lack of a better description, multimedia. So myself and sort of my team, and this is where my experience as a flame artist really kind of came in, the whole 2.5D thing, started to build these sort of full flushed out worlds around Bono that are informed and in many times built on his actual drawings. So he would his book, I don't have it next to me, I have to look inside to look for the book, but it's in my living room, has all these drawings that he's done, and he has this really unique style. It's very sparse. He himself, it was just an interview I saw on the YouTube Instagram a few days ago where he said that very few people can draw as badly as him, which in one way is true. Like, his line style is very basic, but he's incredibly good at emoting and conveying an energy. So we took all of his work, some stuff that he drew especially for us, and then made a bunch of other stuff that is based on his style that was specific for moments in the storytelling. And we're able to place them all around him, and in a way that I think lets you live in that story with him, helps elevate his storytelling without distracting from him. And I just really got very lucky to be able to do something that is unique and an experience that you can really only, like, I can talk my head off, but until you go to the Apple store and put on a Vision Pro, and see it and feel it is going to be very hard to explain. But we were able to like really incorporate him into his art. And in that same interview I just mentioned, he was talking about how walking inside his art was really a mind-blowing experience to him. Seeing his art come to life was really emotional, especially parts where he's talking to his dad, and we were able to kind of draw his dad in his style into it. But there's something very special to this format, this immersive VR format, that has to do with depth. And this is very different than one of these volume kind of stages or environments where you come in and you have walls around you or a sphere around you, or because it's not just that your field of view is filled with content. You can feel something's close and something's far, and little differences like Bono being 2 feet away from you versus being 3 feet away from you create a very different emotional feel. When you're in a room with this sort of I like to call it a sort of wire statue set of the Sorrento Lounge that he talks about. It creates a sort of emotional setting that I think is different and supportive to what he's saying. When you get to see the mountain of sort of bureaucratic work that he was imagining the rest of his life to be, versus the freedom that music was going to give him, and when you can illustrate that by having something that feels like a true mountain of paper boxes looming over you, and really feel close, and then fall right next to your face to kind of clear the air. All of these things give an additional tool to me as a storyteller that is not available in kind of other formats. Now it has all sorts of limitations. First of all, there's no haptic thing. You can't touch anything, even though you really want to.
Yeah.
And you can't, in this format, this is an 180 immersive VR experience that's sort of pre-rendered, so you can't walk around it. You can look around, but you have a set perspective, really. But this thing of distance really is an incredible tool that I think only this medium allows for currently, and maybe for a long time. I think there's give and take to everything, and it was just really fun to work in. Again, I said, like, I was back in a place where I was like, I don't know if this will work, but let's give it a try. And we did some things that really worked out in the end, and there's some things that totally did not. But it was really exciting to kind of try them out. But also, this is a project where, because of Bono's punk background, because of all his drawings being so kind of rough, really allowed me and the art team to really go by hand. So all of the work in there was drawn by people on twos, as we called it. So every other frame, it's all had to be rough to kind of follow his style. Some of the artists were actually too good. Like, their line style was too good to fit Bono's style, and I had to walk them through kind of getting worse and worse, which is really hard for an artist who's been working for years as an illustrator. I said, some of the people, I just said, kind of draw with your non-dominant hand, or use a mouse instead of a Wacom pen, so that it's all a bit messy. But the bottom line is that all of it, even though it's in a very digital environment, it's in this 3D thing that it's computer magic that's making it happen, was still very human. It's still drawn by hand, and the combination of that was a thing that I think makes this project work. And all the other limitations, as I said, production limitations or limitations overall, I think can improve a project. In this case, I certainly think they do. They meant that we had to focus our attention on certain moments. So it was really exciting, and just to work with Bono, honestly, it was kind of out of control. I'm a middle-sized U2 fan, but my wife is a huge U2 fan. So I also got some bonus points for that. But just, being able to support the stuff that he's doing and his experiments and all of that was really sort of out of control.
Yeah, I highly recommend people go to the Apple Store and try on the Vision Pro. I think you have to make an appointment. And I think the trailer for the immersive film is available at the Apple Store. What is difficult to convey is, when you talk about this depth, you talk about, Bono 2 feet away being different to 3 feet away. I'm sure people viewing this are thinking about watching a film when someone comes forward, and they're thinking, okay, I've seen that. But when you're actually looking at it, it's nothing like that. It's so much more, immersive is the word, but it's just so much more powerful because it feels like he's right there. He's, in a way that it doesn't when you're looking at a film screen that's, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 feet away. And yes, he's got bigger on the screen, but it doesn't feel like he's like 2 feet away from you. So that's like amazing. But what do you see? Where do you see it going from here? So, from one, I'll give you a couple of kind of things to riff off. One is there's very little content yet. You mentioned Blackmagic coming out with a camera, which is great, but up to now, the capture devices have been difficult to come by. The reproduction devices, like the Apple Vision Pro, is $4,000, so it's a rich person's plaything at the moment. So there's that diffusion, both in terms of more content creation or being democratized, and also the viewing being democratized. But also then there were two constraints that you talked about: the constraint of no haptics and the constraint of not being able to change your point of view. Do you see those barriers coming down? So I've given you a lot to talk about as the final segment.
So first of all, from just sort of democratization of the process, that's everybody's hard at work in the immersive VR or sort of VR AR world all around at that. So I hear the rumors that Meta is coming out with a new device that's equivalent to the Vision Pro supposedly next year. Apple has put on their development timeline that they've made public maybe a month ago, new versions of the Vision Pro that'll be lighter, and also other sort of devices in sort of head wearable family. All of them will be cheaper, I have no doubt. It's just what happens with technology. And then in terms of the devices, I mean the cameras that I worked with were special cameras that Apple built, and you can't get your hands on them unless you're super lucky. There's, I think, 7 of them in the world, or some really small number. But the Blackmagic cameras are equivalent, built on the same design. It's a collaboration with Apple, and relatively speaking, for professional film cameras, not that expensive. They're still tens of thousands of dollars, but relatively speaking, not that expensive. And also now, due to a process with Apple, Resolve is coming out with a version of Resolve that is supportive of the whole pipeline to do that. I mean, to create the actual finished product that goes on a Vision Pro, but it will be able to go on any other sort of equivalent headset. And the capture, actually, touching on what you said earlier about kind of bit rates and things, the way these Blackmagic cameras capture stuff is probably good enough to make it future proof for quite a while. At 90 frames per second, 7K or so per eye. I don't have all the exact details for the Blackmagic cameras next to me, but it's something in that range. They're quite future proof, so they will allow people to not just make content right now, but also be able to later use it in a bunch of different devices as they come out. So that's sort of that, and it is becoming easier. You can already start to see stuff being released by people who are not Apple or are not working directly for Apple, which is cool. And then there's certainly stuff that being released for all the other devices. The Emmys category this year for what's called emerging media. We didn't actually get in, but a company called Lightsail has 2 projects in there that are both they're both live performances, and one of them is the SNL 50 years celebration, which is actually a 360 VR thing, which starts to like touch on the second half of your question, and that is already a bit of a different format than the one that I was working in, which means you can fully look around. With a 180 VR, you can look around, but you're sort of limited by this sort of half sphere. I personally prefer the 180 VR. I think that we as humans like being told a story and like being led on a journey. And when we need to be too active, when we have to do too much of this and what's going on behind me and all that is it's certainly not what I want when I come back home or whatever and sit down on the sofa. I'd really like to be less active, but there is a whole section of or sort of group of people who've been working in this 360 world for a while, and there are things that like some of the Apple things on the Vision Pro that when they first came out, where you can actually walk around and experience the world. So it's not just this sort of, okay, look at what I made for you, but rather you can really interact with it. And there's people doing very interesting things, and there's things that I'd like to try in that world, but it's a very different sort of experience. And still, for me, at the bottom of it, like I love sitting down and being taken on a journey, and being immersed in it is great. By needing to be active is a interactive is a certain other thing that may be is good in some places and maybe not. And it's a matter of exploring that world. I still think that part of the industry is in that sort of showcase part of thing, and there's people trying to test the edges and see kind of where it goes. But I I like sitting there and being able to again be immersed in things, but not need to be too active most of the time. But again, I also have ideas about how to like try and explore the world and do all these things, especially with music and sound and how you can maybe explore a band's performance as let's say you can walk around on stage while I don't know, the Rolling Stones are playing, and like, oh, let me see what's happening in this corner and like be able to be in a place in a way that is just impossible, that you'd never be able to just roam around a stage while a band is playing, right? And there's new technologies also coming around that would allow this sort of volumetric capture to happen, and this sort of more gameplay in a way sort of thing that's interactive, where things look at you, move because you're there, and or interact with you in any real way. So there's just a lot of new technologies that are, I wish I knew where they were going exactly, but also I'm kind of happy I don't, because it's exciting to see what artists come up with working in this medium, and more artists are kind of coming into play because the tools are getting more democratized. So that's back to our beginning.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to have been selected because you know how to use these tools. Now there's filmmakers, storytellers of all sorts being selected because they can tell a good story,
Mm-hmm.
and tools somebody else will figure out.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I mean, you talk about walking around the stage. I'm fascinated by the audio element of stem separation and spatial
Absolutely.
audio, and where that might lead in terms of being able to empower artists to actually make some money from what they're doing, rather than this completely basically valueless stereo mix that's available through streaming services for $10 a month. But also to be able to get closer to the story, to be able to interact with the story. So I might want to, I'm a drummer. I might want to walk closer to the drummer and hear more what the drummer's doing, and see more what the drummer's doing, and kind of make my own both audio and visual mix. So that's a fascinating concept. And
yeah, it's something I pitched to Pharrell Williams, I don't know, 15 years ago, but I was before my time on that one. And he was like, let's do a test. It's like, we can't really do a test. We have to like invest heavily into all this technology that didn't exist at the time. But now it's getting closer. There's all these ways to try and capture volumetric performance in a way that maybe you can totally walk around, but you can get close to it. I'm sure there's people working on this full thing that I'm not aware of. And I totally feel like you could do that, or even just create a world of like basically where you would take an existing performance and add extra value to it that is supported by the artist and helps the artist monetize their work in sort of new ways. I can see, let's say the worlds I created, like for Bono with his art. I can see a situation where that's an augmented reality or a virtual reality app that you can only get if you're a U2 fan and signed on for an extra $10 a month, or something, and then you get to experience the show in a way that you couldn't any other way, and is an extension of their artistic voice. And it's getting to be at a point where it's easier and easier to do. We're not quite there, I don't think, but it's getting there.
I think it's interesting in the audio domain. There's another element to it. So yes, there's the element of being able to walk around the stage and get close to the drummer and bass player, but there's the element of being able to create music with that in mind.
Sure.
So, the work that I've been doing with Imogen Heap with the gloves, where you can she's actually creating music and throwing instruments into the audience she's not trying to reproduce an acoustic band. She's trying to completely create content with immersive in mind. Yeah. And I first started working with Luciano Berio at Tempo Reale over 30 years ago, doing this with kind of contemporary classical music and stringing 60 speakers in an auditorium to locate things artificially in space. So there's this idea not just of using the technologies to more effectively recreate the acoustic performance, but using the technology as a creative tool to completely, it's kind of like going going from figurative painting to abstract painting. It's like, what if you didn't have to reproduce a landscape, but you just reproduced what was in your head?
Right, or the feel of it. Yeah, I mean, an interesting thing too is with the Vision Pros, Apple just released a new audio codec that is specific to the device, but is all about spatial sound. And what you can do in this new environment is something that you can't do in a movie theater, at least not well, is you can actually place sounds in space, and up or down or left or right or deep or close, and all that makes a big difference. And those tools didn't really exist until very recently.
They're coming. D&B have Soundscape, L-Acoustic have Lisa, Maya Sound have Constellation. They're still expensive, but they're coming. And it's not just being able to place, but being able to dynamically move.
Yeah, for sure. But they can move with an object. Yeah. Like in the Bono thing, I have a one part. There's a drawn lighthouse, and it has a beam that whooshes above your head. And an important part of the sound design that I was working with the team on was like, I want the hair at the back of your head to stand up, because I want this to whoosh in a way that feels like it's going right past you. And that creates an emotion. And, I mean, really, at the end of the day, music and sound create emotion in a way that nothing else can. Maybe smell, but certainly not your eyes. And it just goes straight to the center of your brain and puts your body in a certain state. And that those tools are key. The spatial arrangement of things in these worlds, in these immersive worlds, is key. I think that's still very much getting developed, but without it, without the musical touches that work in this entire world around you, if somebody's whispering in your ear, is one thing, especially I mean, all around. But if you think of something like horror movies or whatever, like, it's one thing when it's kind of far away, but it's left or right or whatever. But it's very different when it's like something's right here.
Yeah, it is. I was at UCSD, where they have a 3D cave, both oral and visual, and they literally had to put like grab rails up, because as people were like bending their heads to watch and listen to like helicopters going overhead, they'd fall over backwards because they're and that exists. And I think there's a really interesting conversation to have between technology companies and artists, so that we, as speaking from the technologist side, can explain to artists what we have and how it allows them to work, but also listen to artists about how they want their dreams to be realized and design equipment to engage that. And I think certainly in the audio domain, that's not happening well enough. There's the artists, the creatives are at one side and the technologists are at another side. I think in the visual domain, it is closer, but in the audio domain, it's not. I also want to say about your field of vision thing, even when I was, viewing this film, I had to remember to look up and, because you told me I could do that, but even though I had 180 degrees, I had to train myself to actually use any more than a small fraction of that, because you're so used to looking forward. The idea that something that you haven't even been made aware of is happening up here is amazing. So I don't see 180 degrees as a big limitation, because we've got to learn to even use 180 degrees rather.
Is that for sure? But the sound does play a big part in that. One you saw wasn't the final mix, so you didn't get the full spatial sound that would draw your attention to where I wanted it to go. But yeah, and no, absolutely. Also, I was thinking of it a little bit like one of the Monty Python movies, which, if you look at them or you watch them again and again, you'll see things in the back of scenes that you didn't notice the first time. there was so much kind of
Yeah.
just sprinkled in. So one of the nice things about this huge field of view is that you can experience it again, and we tried to really do that, next time you'd be like, oh wait, let me explore this a little more. I'm a
Sure.
little less focused on Bono on this round, and I can actually sort of take in some of this bigger world. And you can hopefully do that a couple of times at least and still enjoy the experience, because you're like, oh wait, there's something happening I didn't notice earlier.
And that becomes more like real life. So like I go for the same walk every morning, and it's always different. And part of it's different because the weather's different or the time of year, but part's because I'm just looking at something different. It's all there in real life, but so it's interesting, that virtual reality mimics real life in the way that you can choose your way through rather than having prescriptive. How quickly do you think, we talked about democratization, about spatial, about haptics, but I know you're not a fortune teller, and as you've said, we don't know what's coming, but
You're assuming things, Graeme.
well, I am, yes. I don't know you're not a fortune teller, but I haven't seen any evidence of that in the last 15 years. Do you have an idea of, when we're going to see this hit the mainstream? Is it?
If I had to guess, I think we're probably 5 years away.
Yeah.
Maybe even a little more. But the development timeline is just long. These devices are complicated. They don't seem like it. You're like, oh, it's just this thing that goes on my face. But really, Apple calls it a spatial computer because it is. It needs to understand the world around you and allows you to put things in the space because it knows exactly kind of how it's built. There's a ton of cameras. There's LiDAR sensors. There's all these things. So it's just hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is sort of the content development side, but there's certainly a heating up in the sense that there's more content coming, and to the Vision Pro and to all the other platforms, and it feels like in that range to me, like somewhere in the 5 to 10 years before there's more of that, and it'll be for its specific uses. Every device has the things it's good at, and some people like to pay for $20,000 audio systems because it gives them a certain experience, or some people can't afford it, but people who can, and some people want to have some just cheap headphones on because that's fine, or like your daughter listen just on their phone speaker.
Yeah.
So I think there'll be a lot more opportunities for all of that within the next 5 years, and in different ways. And all the big players are in this certainly immersive world, but I think all the other stuff we talked about, I don't really see a difference personally between immersive and experiential and like live music shows and all of these different formats. I think they're different ways of telling a story, and all of them are driven by new technology. And we're really getting to a point where I think it's becoming a bit agnostic, as in, if you have somebody who's good at telling a story, it doesn't totally matter what the format is. They will find that space, working with the technologist, like you said, kind of developing what needs to happen. And you see it in all the big live shows today, like the amount of technology to do a Taylor Swift show is insane. Only Taylor Swift really can afford something like that, or I don't know, a handful of other people, but that always quickly comes down the line. So I think just these sort of experiences that have to do with visual storytelling, with audio storytelling, and all these technologies are really, I mean, it's weird to say in 2025, but I think they're finally maturing. And my guess is 5 to 10 years before this
Yep.
becomes ubiquitous to like just every day.
Excellent. Well, I've just looked at the clock and realized how long we've been talking. So I should probably bring it to an end. But before I do that, is there anything else that you want to talk about that we haven't talked about?
I'll just say this, I guess, because I have, like I said, I really focused these last few years on trying to make sure that things I do bring joy, and maybe try and improve the world in some way. And I do worry a little bit about the escapist nature of things. I mean, we live in this weird world where at the same time we're bombarded by things from the real world, and we can go disappear into a Vision Pro and be somewhere completely different. And I think it's important to just kind of keep an eye on the humanity part. Actually, Bono is a good example of that. Using his medium, his voice to do things outside of music. And I would just, I don't know, like I'm kind of concerned about, we're all going to just try and escape into this other world. And I hope that we found ways to use all this to actually improve the real world rather than kind of just find a way to disappear into the matrix.
I agree. I think when we talked a couple of weeks ago, I'm really interested in this space in between the really big gigs, the Taylor Swifts, the Adeles, that can only go to a few cities, and the other extreme, like watching it in your home. And I hope there's a middle space. A film that I love is Wim Wenders' film Until the End of the World, where people completely disappear into the ability to see their dreams. And I was just recently reading about a company that's beginning to produce actual hardware that can allow people's dreams to be captured. And
that's crazy.
Kind of both crazy, scary, exciting, which I could say about AI. But thank you so much, Elad. How can people find out more about what you're doing or contact you?
Well, I'm on Instagram at Elad Offer, ELADOFFER. I honestly, if you just Google me, you'll find a bunch of ways. I'm signed with a company called Modern Logic. If you want to do some short form stuff, and I have agents at IAG if you want to do that. All of that should honestly come up on a Google search. But Instagram is probably an easy way. And if you want to slide into my DMs, I'm always happy to talk to people.
Excellent. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you for having me. It's really, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. So for all of you at home, you can see Surroundscapes on any of your podcast formats, Apple, Spotify, or whatever. Probably YouTube actually is probably the best way of on a platform. We also host them all on our website at surroundscapes.bluesoundprofessional.com, and that'll give you more surrounding information. Please subscribe on YouTube to our channel. Please come back. We have episodes every week, so come back and hear us talk. But thank you if you've stuck around for the last hour and a half, for giving us an hour and a half of your time. And thank you again, Elad, for coming on and your perspective, which is fascinating.
You're very welcome. And thanks again for having me on.
Okay, cheers.